Hey folks, welcome back to Biz Talks. In case you're just tuning in, my name is Rick Gutierrez and I am your host and business advocate. This is the space again where we are having great conversations with business professionals that are bringing tips, insights, and all kinds of things in terms of business. So with that being said, I've got another amazing expert in the IT world that is just gonna educate us on lots of things that have to do with IT. I want to welcome Mr. Greg Schaefer to the show. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. We're excited to have you and the great conversation that we're going to have. So we're going to get right into it, Greg, because there's a lot of things that we need to cover and we want to use our time effectively. So with your 3 decades of IT and security field, what motivated you to start, vCISO services, and how does your firm specifically cater to the unique needs to smaller and mid-sized businesses?
I became concerned more so maybe 10 years ago or so, about small and mid-sized businesses, their information security posture. We'd been doing a good job of taking care of larger business needs, but the smaller and mid-sized businesses seemed to be been left off to the side. At that point in time, I was the Chief Information Security Officer for the city of Nashville and Davidson County. But there were breaches that were occurring during that time period that started with small businesses who don't have information security programs. I don't know if you remember, but back in 2013, there was a well-known breach of Target. And now that
Mhm.
breach started by exploiting a small HVAC contractor's vulnerabilities in their network and then jumping over to Target. Nobody talks too much about the small business there that had the issue. Everybody was focused on Target. I think, though, for me, the trigger to start vCISO services was related to the Equifax breach in 2017. That was sort of the last straw. I had already been doing some of the virtual CISO work on the side. I had a couple of clients on the side, but I realized that they don't really have access to that deep risk management experience that we who have been practicing at the CISO level for years can bring to the small and mid-sized businesses. And that's when I really realized that leaving the corporate world was my calling to focus on this full time. And what we do at vCISO Services is we help small and mid-sized businesses build security programs. We don't focus on just helping them become compliant with some issues or some regulations. Any organization really that comes to us and requests that they just want to become compliant with something, we don't take them on. I've said no to a lot of opportunities there, but the reason that we don't is that we firmly believe that the problem that we're trying to solve is rooted in having not just being compliant, but having good information security programs with the small and mid-sized businesses. So it's an extension of the idea that compliance doesn't equal security, but security will bring about compliance. And we want to solve this industry problem, not just be a Band-Aid on top of it.
I would say that it's mainly more just a lack of proper education because IT services is completely different from cybersecurity, right? So you can be in compliance with IT all day long, but you could potentially be very vulnerable to a cyber attack if you don't have the right strategies in place. So
Right.
uh, one of the things that I read up on you is that you are an author and your book is Information Security for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses. Can you share some common cybersecurity risks that some of these businesses face and practical steps they can take to mitigate some of these threats effectively?
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the book. The third edition of it will be coming out October 1st. And really, the whole idea is part of the holistic idea of helping small and mid-sized businesses. They have many of the same risks in information security and cybersecurity as larger businesses, but just at a smaller scale. But as I mentioned before, they don't have the expertise. And larger organizations usually have in place a lot of other stuff. They've got defined policies and procedures. They have the governance set up. So they have a good risk management framework. They adhere to a cybersecurity framework. They have vulnerability management, business continuity strategies, and so on. But SMBs usually don't have a lot of those things in place and really sometimes don't know about them. It's not that they don't want to have these things in place. It's really is a factor of they don't know what they don't know. We talked just a moment ago about IT and the difference with IT and then cybersecurity. Well, information security is strictly an IT issue, sometimes how people see it, but it is not correct. It's why I will emphasize the difference between IT and cybersecurity and information security. So using that nomenclature, cybersecurity is the technical portion of information security in general. In conjunction also with that is that bad advice is also the second, I think, most prevalent risk that they have. We've had to unspool here at vCISO Services in more than a few occasions when we bring on new clients that have been with previous virtual CISOs that weren't really qualified. They didn't have the deep risk management experience, and they made mistakes. And you don't want to practice your trade to learn how to do it by practicing on a business. You want to bring to the business the expertise as it is because it can result in some issues to the business. Now, I think for cybersecurity exclusively, I think the biggest risk that small and mid-sized businesses are facing is not having monitoring capability and processes. So many have Microsoft or Office 365 in place, but how many actually look at logs to see when people have logged in or what their quarantine email logs look like? They may not be focusing on other what we call blocking and tackling, simple things with cybersecurity like patching. They might assume that Windows automatically patches, which it does, but do you really check to make sure that the patch actually was installed? And are you patching any of your other software? Now, finally, they don't usually do much in the area of business continuity and disaster recovery. They don't have the strategies in place. I think that part of it is just the idea that maybe they feel that they're too small to fail and that they won't have to worry about a disruption, or sometimes they feel that they can just manage their way through it. But you don't want to take that approach. Like for in the instance with ransomware, for example, you do not want to be deciding strategy during that time. Do we pay the ransom or not pay the ransom? Do we try to decrypt it ourselves? What do we do? When do we involve our cybersecurity insurer? Those sorts of things you should have worked out in advance and have practiced playbooks and procedures so that when it comes, if it comes, hopefully it won't, but when it does, or if it does, you'll have all those procedures in place and you'll recover a lot faster.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's one of those things to where we have to keep, forefront because we see it on the news or the main media all the time where larger corporations, they're being targeted and potentially have a cyber attack, and it takes, either a part of their departments down or sometimes takes the entire organization down. So one of the things that I also know is that you host the Virtual CISO Movement podcast. Aside from being an author, you stay really busy. So congratulations on that. Let's talk a little bit about what are some of the most pressing topics or trends in information security that you guys have discussed recently in your podcast.
So with the Virtual CISO Moment podcast, I'll bring on a guest in the security space. They can be someone as advanced that has been a CISO for some time, or someone who's just starting out in cybersecurity or information security. And because everybody brings a different perspective, I have the privilege to have interviewed almost 150 to date information and cybersecurity pros and value their input. And the best answer that I have received, I always ask all of my guests, what is the most significant threat to cybersecurity to small and mid-sized businesses based on your view? And again, the best answer that I've received is bad advice. I mentioned that briefly beforehand. To expand on that, small and mid-sized businesses need to understand that what works well for a large business may not work well for a small business. You see and hear a lot of advice, like if you go to security conferences or watch some other podcasts and all that, they focus a lot of their stuff, if you will, their advice on the larger business. Like for example, needing to monitor or needing to have a security operations center. But the small and mid-sized businesses really don't have that need. And to try to normalize, if you will, that advice down to small and mid-sized businesses is tough. Again, different needs, different risks, but they need to be as vigilant as the bigger businesses are. So I think that ransomware and business email compromise, where the criminals interject themselves into an email chain, and usually that results like in an account takeover or the redirection of a wire transfer, for example. I think those are also high on the threats to SMBs, but really a lot of these threats and risks can be mitigated by just simply having a greater sense of awareness in place.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that comes up for me right now, let's say, and I'm sure there are business owners right now, mid-sized business owners that are, potentially thinking about doing something in terms of cybersecurity. What is the number one thing they should do right now?
Well, again, I think it comes down to awareness, and don't take the somewhat common path of thinking, well, I'm too small to be a target, because sometimes they're not necessarily looking for your um, money, your resources. Sometimes they're looking to use your computing resources to either jump off to a larger organization, like I mentioned at the top of the segment, or
Sure.
sometimes they want to use your computing resources to mine Bitcoin, for example. And the attitude of like, I'm too small for this to happen, or nobody has asked me about this, you want to be proactive about your information security posture, because eventually it will come back, and it could mean some significant issues for your business.
Absolutely. Greg, we want to thank you so much for being on the show and providing us with this valuable content, this valuable information. We want to make sure that you come back to the show and continue to educate us a little bit more on future segments. So thank you for coming by. We certainly do appreciate it. And folks, we're going to go into a quick commercial break. We'll be right back with another guest.